Hitman 3 is developed and published by IO Interactive. It is a 2021 game, guys. Let's start this thing off. So this follows the previous two titles, also developed by IO Interactive, Hitman and Hitman 2, both coming out a couple of years ago, 2016, I believe. Hitman 1 came out, and then Hitman 2 came out in 2018, and now in 2021, we have Hitman 3, which is following on from the storylines of the previous two games. That's how sequels work. I've been a really, really big fan of this kind of new rebooted Hitman series since the first game. Obviously, the first game, for those who don't know, IO Interactive developed that game, but was published by Square Enix, and then Square Enix thought it would be a good idea to drop them because they didn't think that Hitman met its certain expectations, mainly down to the way that they published that game, with releasing a level every couple of months or so. And then IO Interactive went, okay, we'll just publish it ourselves. And they've done a fantastic job since then. I actually think Hitman 1 may be my favorite out of the two before I went into Hitman 3, I would say, merely based on the levels and what kind of levels they were and the interesting things you can do in it. But Hitman 2 had some outstanding kind of levels and locations in that game as well. Miami being probably my favorite in Hitman 2. I would say the first two Hitman games are great. I highly, highly recommend them. They are stealth-based games. If you've never played them before, they're very creative, very fun kind of sandbox experiences. So play them. I like them. You probably will like them too. Now I'm going to talk about Hitman 3. So Hitman 3 picks off where we left off with Hitman 2. Diana and Agent 47, along with Lucas, have gone off on their own little charade because of what happened with the ICA, and are going to tackle Providence themselves. In a way, because of the recent events of the previous games, and mostly because of Hitman 2 and the end of that game, Hitman 3 is drawn by its story, and everything is really coming to a conclusion because, if you don't know as well, this is the final Hitman game. This is the last game in the trilogy. IO Interactive are going to do the James Bond games after this. We don't know if we're going to see Hitman again. I'm sure we will, but this is the last in this trilogy. So they're going to try hit home with this story and have a satisfying conclusion to it. However, let's talk about the first thing that you'll probably notice about Hitman 3 when you first start it, especially when you played the previous two games, is that this game looks pretty good. This has had a bit of an update, especially towards its lighting effects and its particles and just a lot of different light sources all around. It's a pretty good looking game. I'm not even sure RTX is actually enabled for Hitman 3. I might be wrong in saying that, but I don't think it is. And even if it isn't, it still looks like a much better looking game, especially in kind of nighttime scenes when you have a lot of lights. There's a couple of levels, particularly one in China, where it really stands out how much the lighting has improved in this game. It just makes a lot of things and a lot of things to look at a lot more prettier. Not really essential in a Hitman game when most of the time you're going around sneaking around and you can't really go, oh, look at the pretty lights and look at the pretty stuff all around. But it just adds to some of the cinematic moments in this game. And as I explained before, Hitman 3 is probably the most story-driven of all the Hitman games, and therefore it's the most cinematic as well. And these updated graphics just add to that kind of cinematography in a way in a game, and I kind of appreciate it. It's really nice looking. It's just a little thing. It's not a huge thing that's going to change the game, but it's just one of those things where you'll instantly notice it, especially from the first level. And like with the previous two Hitman games, we get brand new locations. There are 6 new locations in Hitman 3. If you're saying that sounds a bit short, it is. I think it's the shortest they had in terms of amount of levels that they had in Hitman game in all of the series. If we count the DLC, I think it might be the same as Hitman 2. Whatever the case, it's 6 levels. Now, a lot's weighing on these levels because, to me, the most important thing in a Hitman game, for me personally, like the thing I look forward to the most out of the Hitman games, is these locations and finding out all the different things about them, like the secret passages, the different ways you can traverse, how you can get into different areas, what kind of people can you disguise yourself as in this kind of place. But the thing that weighs on a lot of these Hitman games, especially I would say for Hitman 2, which had a bit of a mixture of levels, but a lot of the levels in Hitman 2 were very, very hit and miss. There's a lot that I just didn't really enjoy. And there was a couple that I thought were excellent, but it never was consistent across that whole entire game. But I'm happy to say that Hitman 3, I would say, is perhaps on par, if not the best set of locations we've had in any Hitman game. I would probably say that I enjoyed about more than half of the levels out of the 6 that were in Hitman 3. Probably about 4 of them. I really, really, really enjoyed them. I think they're excellent levels and excellent locations as well. China, as I mentioned before, is in a nighttime setting and it looks absolutely beautiful. Probably the best looking level out of all of them. But that would be closely followed by Mendoza, Argentina, which is, good Lord, the first time I saw this, I was absolutely blown away. It is a winery, essentially. It's a huge landscape, but it's essentially this giant winery. This and China, in terms of visuals, you kind of want to look at these levels and go, whoa, this is like a huge upgrade over the previous 2 Hitman games, just by looking at these 2 levels. Not only is it the visuals of these locations that make them stand out, it is the actual gameplay elements of them as well. There's a lot more strategic, fun little things you can do in these levels. And I found myself finding loads of different things I could potentially do. And obviously with the previous Hitman games, there's not many levels, but they're hugely replayable. And I would say for these locations, I found them really intriguing and really fun to play in. And I play them over and over again, doing different challenges after I finish the main story on these particular 4 ones. Unfortunately, one of the locations is possibly one of the worst I've played in the whole franchise. And unfortunately, it's the last level, and you kind of want to go out with a little bit of a bang. And without spoiling it, it's such a different type of level, but it's also very familiar. And that kind of annoys me a little bit. Again, I'm not going to spoil it here, but the problem with the last location is that it's too tied into the story. So it doesn't really make it a sandbox experience like the other levels. In fact, this last level could be really a throwaway level because it's mainly just tied into the story and how everything ends with the story. And it's not really a sandbox experience with it. It's more just like an on-rails level. And therefore, it's a little bit of a throwaway level in terms of replayability. I mean, you can replay it, that you can do it in different ways and stuff like all the Hitman levels before it, but it's so much throwaway that it's the most throwaway level, I think, as a sandbox game in the entire franchise. And you can't really have that replayability and fun with it that you have in the previous levels and the previous games before it. It's disappointing. So essentially, in my eyes, you're getting 5 levels, 5 sandbox levels. And I would say 4 of them are really, really good. So that's a good thing, right? But it's annoying that one of these levels is a bit throwaway. Either way, we'll move on. Like I said before, if I was to describe Hitman 3 in a very, very basic sense that most people would understand, it is the most James Bondy out of all of the 3 Hitman games, I would say. Not to say that it's more action-adventure packed, but it does have more of those elements built in to the sandbox levels. Yes, as I said, there is one level that goes to James Bondy and it becomes more of that action-adventure kind of level. But the rest of these levels really have a lot to kind of say when it comes into like the actionness of entering these levels and infiltrating these levels. The opening level to Hitman 3, Dubai, is probably a really, really good example of how it sets the tone for the actual game itself. You start off this game by getting basically free falling to the tallest tower in Dubai, and you have to infiltrate the tower from the outside and trying to get in through the windows and climbing up pipes on the biggest tower of all, with very, very cinematic moments and unexpected kind of cool moments that you wouldn't expect in a very mute Agent 47. But because of this, I think it adds more of an urgency and more of an emotion to the story this time around. I think that's kind of what lacked in the previous 2 Hitman games. The thing about it is that while the story is interesting, and I found it interesting, I only really got interested in it or paid attention to it when Hitman 2 kind of developed the story a lot more. But it wasn't a story that was mind-blowing to me or absolutely exceeding my expectations. It was just kind of a story that was part of a sandbox game. And with Hitman 3, I think it tries to do the opposite. It tries to make you look at this game, still a sandbox game, yes, but also this is it. This is the final game in Hitman trilogy. We want you to feel a little bit more this time around. It really does try to push those emotional buttons with you in Hitman 3 a little bit more, especially with the relationship between 47 and Diane. These characters have been together since the very start. They're very close together, but they also have a lot of mystery and a lot of secrets behind each other. But you don't really know everyone's true intentions in this game, which I think makes it a little bit intriguing. But at the same time, I had this little extra element while playing the Hitman games that I didn't really have in the previous 2, where I said to myself, oh crap, what's going to happen with the story now that this has happened? And I never felt like that in the previous 2 Hitman games, but I felt like that in 3. As I said, it's not necessarily a great story. It's not necessarily a mind-blowing story, but it does have its twists and turns, and it's definitely an improvement and more of a focus than the previous 2 games. And that was just an extra element added on to what already is a very, very good franchise and a very, very good sandbox game. Besides the locations, in terms of new things in Hitman 3, very little. I would say it's very much the previous 2 games. There is a new tool called the camera. It's amazing, isn't it? It's essentially a camera where you can point at hackable doors and they will open. But that's pretty much it. Everything is pretty much the same as the previous 2 Hitman games. In the gameplay department, you sneak around, you get disguises, you hide the bodies, you create distractions, you try to do creative kills. Like, there's many different ways you can kill your targets. There's challenges to do, there's elusive targets to do. There's a lot to do. And that's why I love these games, is that even though a lot of people, and I've seen some of them, a lot of people will criticize Hitman for its short levels or not enough levels on paper. If you look at it on paper, yes, as I said before, 1 levels is throwaway, so 5 levels, let's put it that way, as a sandbox game, is not a lot. And it doesn't sound like a lot. And you would probably expect for a full price game like this to get around 10 levels or something. But there's so much to do in these giant levels, and they are giant, a lot of them. The majority of them are giant levels. There's so many things you can do. It's not just about following the main story and taking out the main targets that progress the story. It's about the challenges. It's about doing things without doing certain things. You know, it's setting yourself own challenges and playing around in this sandbox, essentially. Playing around with it and trying to figure out different ways of doing different things. This game's main focus is a stealth sandbox game. That means there's a lot of different things you can do in all these levels, and you should try them out sometimes because they're actually quite fun. Hitman 3 doesn't reinvent the formula of its previous 2 games. It just improves it in various different ways, and also capitalizes on making the best out of these sandbox levels. While there is some letdowns in regards to one of the levels being a little bit throwaway, in my opinion, I think Hitman 3 is more or less on par with the levels and the fun I had in Hitman 1. So I would say it is probably one of the best in the series. So if you're looking for more Hitman and you want to complete the story and say goodbye to these characters, because it'll probably be a long time before we see another Hitman game, I absolutely think that Hitman 3 is and will be, by the end of the year, a game we still talk about. It's an awesome game, it's an awesome series, and it's an awesome way to finish Agent 47's story. With that being said, I'm going to give Hitman 3 an 8 out of 10. And yes, I'm coming back with video reviews, starting with this one. So yay, hooray, video reviews are back. So I'm going to start with some of the games that came out early 2021 that I didn't get a review out on time, obviously. So I'm going to get those cleared, and then we'll probably dip into some games that were 2020 or beforehand. I still want to kind of go back and do old reviews on stuff, like old games and stuff, because I think I focused a lot on new games. So there will be a quiet period, I think, some point in 2021 where no new games come out, but for the time being, I'm probably just going to catch up with those kind of games. However, if you would like me to review a particular game now that I'm back doing these video reviews, please leave it in the comments below, and I will do maybe a review on that game. Preferably, it's a 2021 game, for the time being at least, because I'm trying to get all the 2021 games up to date, since I missed a couple of weeks with the new games that came out. But either way, thank you very much for watching. Shall see you very, very soon. Bye.